I was folding laundry in the cramped living room of my Hartford apartment when my phone buzzed. It wasn't anything unusual, just the same faint vibration against the table that usually meant a pharmacy reminder, a neighbor's wrong number, or some advertisement about Medicare plans. Still, I glanced at the screen with a little flutter of hope I could never quite shake. Maybe it was Kate. At 66 years old, you'd think I'd have learned better than to expect kindness from my only daughter, but mothers are built differently. We cling to hope even when it cuts us. The message on my screen was brief, casual, devastating. Don't bother. We're moving. Your house has been sold. Bye. I stared at the words, my laundry slipping from my hands, tumbling onto the floor like a surrender flag. I read it again, and once more, as if repetition could alter its meaning. My house, sold, 30 years of memories dismissed in 4 sentences. My knees gave out. I sank onto the couch that sagged in the middle, the one piece of furniture I'd bought for this apartment 2 years ago. My hands trembled as I gripped the phone, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The casual cruelty of it was worse than a slap. No conversation, no warning, just a text message that tossed me out of my own life. It was the kind of text you send to a telemarketer, not your mother. I tried calling immediately, but the line went straight to voicemail. Of course, she'd probably blocked me the moment she hit send. Blocked. Like a stranger. My chest tightened, the same way it had all those years ago when Richard walked out, leaving me to raise Kate alone, but this time, it was my own daughter doing the abandoning. I whispered the words aloud, as if naming them would make them less surreal. She sold my house. She sold it without me. But something in me snapped then. My fingers, stiff and shaking, typed out a reply. Okay. But you forgot something. It was almost instinct, a desperate lash of dignity, though I wasn't sure what I meant in that moment. Maybe I wanted her to squirm, to wonder if I had some secret card up my sleeve. Her response came faster than I expected. What are you talking about? I could practically hear the edge in her voice even through the screen, the clipped tone she'd perfected over the last few years, the one that made me feel like a nuisance, a shadow cluttering her perfect life. I set the phone down on the coffee table, heart hammering. For the first time in years, she wanted something from me. The power had shifted, just slightly, and I felt it. I stood and walked toward the window that overlooked the courtyard. Mrs. Rodriguez from 3B was tending her flowers again, pruning them with the same patient care she gave her grandchildren. A pang of envy stabbed through me. When had I become such a burden to my own child? When had Kate stopped looking at me as her mother and started seeing me as dead weight? Memories surged, sharp and unrelenting. Kate at 5 years old, crying over a scraped knee, begging only for my kiss to make it better. Kate at 16, slamming the front door after an argument, only to sneak back in through her window while I waited up, heart tight with worry. Kate at 21, crossing the stage at her college graduation while I clapped until my palms stung. Every milestone tied to that house on Maple Street, her first steps on those wooden floors, her first tooth lost in that kitchen, her first heartbreak soothed on that porch swing. I'd worked double shifts at Mercy General, swallowed exhaustion and loneliness, all to keep a roof over her head. And now she'd sold it behind my back, without my consent, like it had never been mine at all. I scrolled through our recent messages, me sending her pictures of sunsets, of articles about her old school, of recipes I thought she might like. She rarely replied. When she did, it was a curt okay or busy. My stomach twisted with the realization that I'd been begging for scraps of her attention, humiliating myself in silence. The house, God, the house. It wasn't just wood and drywall. It was blood, sweat, sacrifice. It was the battlefield where I fought to give her a better life. I remembered how, 2 years ago, she and Derek had started dropping hints. "Mom, you're rattling around in that big house all by yourself," Kate had said, her voice syrupy sweet, though her eyes flickered with calculation. "Wouldn't you be happier somewhere smaller, easier to maintain?" Derek had chimed in lawyer slick. "Think of the equity, Margaret. You could be set for life." They made it sound like a gift, convincing me to move into this cramped apartment while they handled everything. Renovations, buyers, paperwork. They told me to relax, to let them take care of me. And like a fool, I trusted them. Now here I was, in exile, stripped of the very thing I'd broken myself to protect. The phone buzzed again. "Mom, answer me, what did we forget?" Her panic almost made me smile. Almost. I imagined her pacing in my old kitchen, the kitchen with the bay window where I used to drink coffee every morning. I pictured Derek hovering beside her, muttering about contracts and buyers, about money slipping through their greedy fingers. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the one cowering. Because there was something they'd forgotten, something I hadn't even thought about in years, but which suddenly felt like salvation. Back when Richard left me with nothing but a mortgage and a 12-year-old daughter, I had panicked. I had imagined 100 ways I could lose that house through debt, through illness, through sheer exhaustion. And in my fear, I had done something smart, something no one knew about. I'd created a trust. I'd never mentioned it to Kate. She was too young then, and later, it had never seemed necessary. But the documents still existed, tucked away in a safety deposit box at the bank. The deed was still in my name, and that trust carried conditions Kate had just spectacularly failed to meet. My phone lit up again, her name flashing across the screen, this time, a call. "Mom, call me back right now," her voicemail demanded when I let it ring out, her voice cracked with panic. "This isn't funny, what are you talking about?" I sat back on the couch, listening to her desperation echo in my ears. For the first time in 2 years, she needed me. For the first time in 2 years, I held the power. But I wasn't ready to play my hand yet. Not until I knew exactly what she'd done, who she'd sold the house to, how far along the process had gone. The truth was, my daughter thought she'd erased me with a text message, but she'd forgotten the law doesn't erase that easily, and neither do mothers. I picked up the folded laundry from the floor, smoothing a blouse across my lap. My heart was still racing, but it was no longer from despair, it was something else. A simmering strength I hadn't felt in years. I glanced at the phone again, still buzzing with unanswered calls. Kate could wait. I had plans to make. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. The phone kept buzzing on the nightstand, flashing Kate's name again and again, but I let it vibrate until the battery gave out. I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling of my Hartford apartment, the words of her text burning behind my eyes. "Your house has been sold." By dawn, the city outside stirred with its usual rhythm, delivery trucks groaning down Albany Avenue, the muffled chatter of neighbors heading to early shifts, but in my mind I was far away. Not in this cramped apartment with its paper-thin walls and peeling paint, but back in the house on Maple Street, back where everything began. I closed my eyes and let myself remember. It was 1989, and the kitchen smelled of antiseptic from my scrubs, mixed with the sweet aroma of peanut butter sandwiches. Richard stood by the door with a suitcase. He didn't look at me, not really. His eyes were already elsewhere on the secretary 10 years younger, who thought his jokes were charming. "I can't do this anymore, Margaret," he said flatly. "I need something different." "What about Kate?" I whispered. She was 12, still in her pajamas, watching cartoons in the living room, unaware her father was abandoning her. He shrugged. "She'll be fine, kids need their mothers anyway." And then he was gone. That was the last real conversation we ever had. The occasional check came for a few years, always late, always smaller than promised, until even those stopped. I remember the morning after, sitting Kate down at the kitchen table, her small hands clutching the edge like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Her green eyes, his eyes searched my face. "When is Daddy coming back?" I lied through my teeth, tasting bitterness as I said, "He had to go away for work, sweetheart, but it's you and me now, against the world." And she nodded. She trusted me. That trust became the fire that fueled me through years of exhaustion. The mortgage on Maple Street was $1,500 a month, and my salary as a nurse at Mercy barely covered it. But I couldn't let us lose the house. That house was stability, proof that I could keep us afloat when everything else had drowned. So I worked doubles, nights and weekends. I stitched wounds, held dying hands, and swallowed grief, then came home to an empty kitchen where bills stacked like bricks. Kate learned to make her own dinners. She walked herself to school. She never asked for much. But I gave her everything I could. When she was 15 and wanted to take AP biology, the school required a personal microscope, $250 I didn't have. I worked a weekend shift in the ER, came home with a bruise under my eye from a patient high on meth who'd lashed out, but I bought that microscope. When she was 16 and dreaming of prom, I spent my entire tax refund on the dress, the shoes, the hair appointment, even a limo she split with friends. The look on her face when she saw herself in the mirror made every ache in my body worth it. When she was 17 and applying for colleges, I refinanced the house again, 37 applications at $75 each. Almost $3,000 I didn't have. But she got into the state university with a partial scholarship. I took a second mortgage to cover the rest. Those years nearly broke me. Ramen noodles for dinner, scrubs worn until the color faded, a car that coughed smoke every other month. The thermostat set to 62 in winter. But when she walked across that graduation stage, magna cum laude smiling at me in the audience, I told myself it was all worth it. All of it. For a while, it was. She landed a good job in marketing in New York, steady pay, benefits, a future. She moved into a stylish apartment downtown, started dating Derek Hughes, a junior partner at a law firm. At first, she still called. Still asked for advice. I was proud. Proud enough to overlook the way the calls grew shorter. The way visits home grew fewer. Then came the comments. "Mom, that house is too big for you. You're wasting money keeping it up. Wouldn't you be happier somewhere smaller?" I was 58 when she first brought it up. Still working full-time, still climbing ladders to change light bulbs, still mowing the lawn every weekend. I didn't need saving. But she and Derek said it so often that their words began to burrow under my skin. "Mom, Derek knows a great real estate agent. Just an estimate, no harm. Think of the equity. It's smart financial planning." I brushed it off at first, but after they married, the pressure intensified. Every conversation circled back to the same refrain: sell the house, move somewhere smaller, let us handle it. I should have recognized it for what it was. Manipulation. Slowly, methodically convincing me that staying in my home was selfish, that I was impractical, that I was a burden. But she was my daughter, the girl I'd sacrificed everything for. How could I believe she would betray me? So I listened. I agreed to move temporarily into an apartment, just while they got the house ready for the market. They promised me something perfect. They promised to take care of everything, and like a fool, I trusted them. I opened my eyes, back in the dim apartment. The memories left a sour taste in my mouth. The text on my phone still glared at me. "Your house has been sold." Of course they hadn't asked my permission. Of course they hadn't consulted me. They'd been grooming me for this for years. But they had forgotten one thing. When Richard left, terrified of losing everything, I had gone to Thomas Brennan, a lawyer recommended by a colleague at the hospital. Together, we created a trust. It was simple, designed to protect the house if anything happened to me. The deed had never been transferred into Kate's name. The trust required certain conditions to be met before she could inherit conditions about maintaining a respectful relationship, about including me in major decisions. She had just violated every one of them. I hadn't thought about that trust in years. I'd assumed I'd never need it, but suddenly it was my lifeline. The phone buzzed again, jarring me back. Another message from Kate. "Mom, I'm getting worried. Call me back. We need to talk." The desperation in her tone almost made me laugh. She'd never sounded so frantic, not even during her college finals. And for the first time in years, she needed me more than I needed her. I set the phone down and walked to the window. Outside, Mrs. Rodriguez was still trimming her flowers, oblivious to the storm unraveling inside me. I envied her peace. But I also felt something else. A pulse of determination. Tomorrow, I would go to the bank. Tomorrow, I would open that safety deposit box and confirm what I remembered. If those papers were still there, then this story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Morning broke cold and gray, the kind of Hartford morning where the air seemed to stick to your skin. I wrapped my scarf tighter as I walked toward the First National Bank. My phone vibrated in my purse with another call from Kate. I ignored it. She could scream into the void for once. The glass doors hissed open, and the scent of polished marble and old money hit me. The lobby was quiet, filled with the soft click of heels and the shuffle of papers. Behind the counter, I spotted a familiar face, Mrs. Rodriguez, the branch manager. She had more silver in her hair now, but her smile was the same. "Margaret Patterson," she said warmly, her eyes lighting up. "I haven't seen you in ages. How's Kate?" The question cut sharper than she realized. I forced a polite smile. "She's busy." Mrs. Rodriguez nodded sympathetically, then led me through the heavy vault doors. The cool air inside smelled faintly metallic, like secrets. She handed me the small box with a knowing look. Same procedure as always. I carried it to a private booth and sat down, my hands trembling. For a moment, I just stared at the metal box, remembering the day I first opened it in 1999. I'd been terrified, then alone, abandoned, with a mortgage I could barely pay. I had walked into Brennan's office with a folder of bills and a sinking feeling that I could lose everything. He'd been the one to suggest the trust. "Think of it as insurance," he'd said, "not for money, for peace of mind." I'd signed the papers, tucked them away, and almost forgotten, until now. With a deep breath, I unlocked the box. Inside, everything was just as I'd left it. My will, some old jewelry, insurance policies. And then, the documents that mattered most: the original deed to the Maple Street house, and the trust agreement itself. My name was still on the deed. The trust clearly spelled out that the property could not be sold or transferred without my explicit consent, and only if my heir maintained a respectful and caring relationship with me. My hands steadied as I read the words. Kate had violated every condition. I took out my phone and snapped pictures of each page, the flash briefly illuminating the small booth like a camera catching a thief in the act. For once, I wasn't the one being stolen from. An hour later, I stood in the courthouse, requesting access to public property records. The clerk barely looked at me as she typed, then slid a stack of documents across the counter. The house on Maple Street had indeed been listed for sale. The buyers: Daniel and Emily Henderson, a young couple with 2 children. The purchase price, $450,000. Closing date, 10 days from now. My stomach churned as I scanned the paperwork. The Hendersons had already been approved for their mortgage. Inspections completed, contracts signed. They probably had boxes packed, ready to move into what they thought was their dream home. But the house wasn't Kate's to sell. It wasn't Derek's. It was mine. I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot, staring at the documents, my breath fogging the windshield. The rage that had burned all night cooled into something harder, sharper. Resolve. They thought I was powerless. They thought age and loneliness had made me weak. But they had underestimated the one thing they should have known best about me. I had survived worse. I had survived Richard's betrayal. I had survived decades of exhaustion. I had survived raising Kate alone with nothing but grit and stubborn love. I could survive this too. As I sat there, my phone rang again. Kate's name flashed across the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mom, thank God," she said. Her voice rushed, panicked. I could hear Derek in the background, his tone clipped, annoyed. "Where have you been? Why aren't you answering me?" "I've been busy," I said evenly. "Taking care of business." "What did you mean yesterday, when you said we forgot something?" Silence stretched between us. I let it linger, let her sweat. Finally I asked, "Kate, tell me about the sale of the house." She hesitated. "What about it? We found great buyers, the price is excellent, the closing is next week. We're handling everything just like we promised. And where exactly do I fit into this transaction?" More silence. I could almost hear her mind racing. "Mom, you don't need to worry about the details. Derek's handled all the legal stuff. The proceeds will go into an account for you. We're thinking of setting up something nice for your retirement. Maybe an annuity." I almost laughed. They wanted to sell my house, keep the money, and hand me an allowance like a child. "Whose name is on the deed, Kate?" I asked quietly. "Well, I mean, we've been living there, paying for improvements. You moved out, so obviously." "Whose name is on the deed?" I repeated, sharper now. "This is silly," she snapped. "We can talk later. The important thing is everything's taken care of." That told me everything I needed to know. She had never even looked at the deed. She'd simply assumed. "Kate," I said, my voice steady, "come to my apartment. We need to talk. Now." "I can't. Derek has a meeting. The kids have soccer practice." "Either you come," I interrupted, "or I call the real estate agent and stop this sale myself." The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally she spoke again, but her voice had changed. Cold, calculating. "You can't stop it, Mom. The contracts are signed. Everything is legal." "Are you sure about that?" I asked. And then I hung up. 20 minutes later, there was pounding on my apartment door. I let her wait a full minute before opening it. Kate stood there, her face flushed with fury, Derek behind her, his jaw tight. She pushed past me into the living room, not even waiting for an invitation. Derek followed, trying to project calm, but there was a nervous twitch in his jaw. "What the hell is going on?" Kate demanded. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it. "Why don't you tell me?" She crossed her arms, glaring. "You're scaring us, Mom. What's this nonsense about stopping the sale?" I pulled out my phone and held up the picture of the deed. "This nonsense?" Derek leaned forward, squinting at the screen. I watched the color drain from his face. "That's impossible," Kate whispered. "You moved out," she stammered. "You gave us permission to sell. We've been paying for the renovations." "I moved out of my house," I said evenly. "I never transferred ownership. The house is still mine. It has always been mine." Derek cleared his throat, lawyer voice kicking in. "Mrs. Patterson, I think there's been a misunderstanding. When Kate asked me to handle the sale, we naturally assumed." "Did you?" I cut him off. "Or did you just not bother to check because you figured the old woman wouldn't know any better?" His mouth snapped shut. He knew the truth. I turned back to Kate. "So here we are. You sold a house that isn't yours. Signed contracts you had no right to sign. Do you understand what that means?" Her lips trembled, but she didn't answer. "Fraud," I said softly. "It means fraud." The air inside my apartment felt heavy, as if the walls themselves knew this was the moment the charade would finally unravel. Kate stood in the center of my tiny living room, her designer heels sinking into the threadbare rug, looking like she'd stepped straight from a Manhattan boardroom into a place she believed was beneath her. Derek loomed behind her, the perfect accessory, a polished suit, expensive tie, arrogance clinging to him like cologne. "This is insane," Kate snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're being completely irrational." I stayed by the door, arms folded, the phone with the deed photo still glowing in my hand. "Am I?" I asked, calm, steady. "Because from where I'm standing, you sold property you don't own. That doesn't sound rational to me." Derek cleared his throat, slipping into the smooth cadence of his courtroom voice. "Mrs. Patterson, let's not escalate things unnecessarily. There are contracts, buyers involved. This is a matter of good faith. We all want what's best for everyone here." "What's best," I said, narrowing my eyes, "is that my daughter remembers whose roof she grew up under, whose blood paid that mortgage every month, and who still owns that house." Kate's face flushed crimson. "We've put thousands into renovations. We've been paying taxes, utilities, everything while you rattled around here. You don't even live there anymore, Mom. Why would you want to move back into that old place?" "Because it's mine," I said, the words simple, undeniable. Kate began pacing, arms flailing. "You can't do this. The sale is scheduled to close in less than 2 weeks. The Hendersons are counting on it. If you stop it now, you'll ruin everything." I tilted my head. "Ruin everything for who? Them? Or you?" Her lips pressed into a tight line. Derek stepped forward, his lawyer mask slipping for the briefest moment. "Margaret, listen to reason. If this sale collapses, there could be serious repercussions. Penalties, lawsuits. The Hendersons could sue for breach of contract. You'll drag your own name through the mud." I laughed, then a short, bitter sound. "My name? My name isn't on those contracts. Yours are. You signed papers for property you had no right to sell. You should be worried about your own name." For the first time, Derek faltered. His eyes flicked to Kate, then back to me. Kate shook her head violently. No, you can't do this to me, to us. We've planned everything around this sale." The word echoed, planned. Planned without me. Planned around me, as if I were already gone. I walked to the small bookshelf in the corner, pulled out a folder. Inside were all the documents they'd tried to push on me over the past 2 years: power of attorney forms, authorization slips, insurance updates. Blank, unsigned. I spread them across the coffee table like playing cards. "You tried, didn't you? You thought I'd sign whatever you slid under my nose. But I didn't, not once. And now you've got nothing legal, nothing binding. Derek's jaw tightened. Kate's hands trembled. "You're destroying this family," Kate whispered, her voice thin, desperate. "After everything we've done for you, everything you've done for me?" I cut her off, my voice rising. "I worked myself half to death to keep that house after your father left. I skipped meals so you could have prom dresses, scholarships, opportunities. And now you repay me by trying to erase me with a text message." Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't the tears of remorse. They were the hot, frustrated tears of a child denied candy. "Nobody asked you to do those things." The words hit like a slap. For a moment the room spun, but then something inside me hardened. "You're right," I said quietly. "Nobody asked me. I chose to, because I loved you, because I thought that's what mothers do." Her face crumpled, but I felt no sympathy, only clarity. Derek tried again, his tone carefully measured. "Margaret, let's not be hasty. We can work something out, a compromise. You'll still benefit financially. Think of the retirement security. Travel, comfort. Isn't that what you want?" "What I want," I said, leaning forward, "is for you both to get out of my apartment." Kate gasped. "Mom, out," I repeated, pointing to the door. Neither of them moved. So I pulled out my phone and dialed. The line rang once before Brennan's voice filled the speaker. "Margaret, is everything okay?" I held the phone out. "Tom, my daughter and son-in-law are in my apartment. They refuse to leave." There was a pause, then Brennan's voice sharpened. "Kate, Derek, this is Attorney Thomas Brennan. You've been notified in writing that Margaret Patterson is the sole legal owner of the Maple Street property. Any further entry without her consent is criminal trespass. Do you understand?" Derek's face drained of color. Kate looked stricken. I ended the call but left the implication hanging. "Now," I said softly, "out." They finally moved. Derek grabbed Kate's arm, steering her toward the door. But just before leaving, Kate spun back, eyes blazing. "Fine," she spat. "Keep your damn house. Live there all alone like the bitter old woman you've become. But don't expect us to be there when you need help. Don't expect us to care." The door slammed behind them, rattling the frame. The silence afterward was deafening. I sank onto the couch, my chest heaving. I'd expected sadness, grief, maybe guilt. Instead, what filled me was something else entirely. Relief. For the first time in years, the weight of begging for her love was gone. I sat there for a long time, staring at the papers on the coffee table, the photos of the deed glowing on my phone. I had the truth, I had the law, I had my house. But beneath that relief simmered another feeling. Anger. Not just at Kate and Derek, but at myself for letting it get this far, for letting them convince me I was irrelevant. No more. 3 days later, I stood in front of my old house on Maple Street, clutching a set of freshly cut keys from the locksmith. The sky was a brilliant Connecticut blue, the air crisp with the promise of spring. Yet my stomach churned as though I were about to step into a stranger's home. The house looked different, even from the outside. The warm blue shutters I had painted myself years ago had been replaced with sleek black ones. The flower beds, once filled with tulips and marigolds, had been stripped bare, replaced by low-maintenance shrubs that looked like they belonged outside an office building. This wasn't the house I remembered. I slipped the key into the lock, the door clicked open, and I stepped inside. The smell hit me first: new paint, new wood, a faint hint of chemical cleaner. Gone was the comforting scent of coffee and cinnamon that had lingered in the walls after decades of family breakfasts. The living room was unrecognizable. The honey-colored walls I had painted by hand had been bleached to stark white. My cozy sofa and well-worn armchairs had been replaced by sleek furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. It was beautiful, maybe, but cold, sterile. I walked slowly, my shoes clicking on hardwood that gleamed unnaturally. They had ripped out the old carpet, the one I'd vacuumed 1,000 times after spilled juice boxes and muddy sneakers. The den, once filled with built-in bookshelves that held my nursing journals and Kate's school projects, had been gutted. Empty walls stared back at me, soulless. I pressed a hand against the wall, as though I could will the memories back into existence. Kate learning to read on the rug, Derek bringing over flowers after their engagement dinner. The Christmas mornings with torn wrapping paper scattered everywhere. Gone. All of it. The kitchen was the hardest. My heart twisted as I stepped into the space where I'd spent so many mornings watching the sunrise through the bay window. The familiar white cabinets were gone, replaced with sleek gray ones. The counters, once warm butcher block I'd chosen for their durability, were now cold granite. Stainless steel appliances glinted under bright LED lights. I reached out, running my fingers over the countertop. It was smooth, flawless, lifeless. This had been the heart of my home. I had taught Kate to bake cookies here. I had balanced bills on this counter while she did homework beside me. I had cried here, silently, when her father left us. Now it looked like a showroom kitchen, something meant to impress strangers, not nourish a family. I sank into one of the bar stools, my knees suddenly weak. How had I let this happen? Upstairs was no better. The master bedroom had been repainted in trendy gray, the kind of color that sucked warmth from the air. My old quilt, hand-stitched by my grandmother, was gone, replaced by a hotel-style duvet. In Kate's childhood bedroom, I found boxes stacked neatly along the wall. My pulse quickened as I pulled one open. Inside were fragments of a life, her stuffed animals, high school yearbooks, old art projects. At the bottom I found it, a small ceramic handprint she'd made for me in 2nd grade. Painted purple, with "I love you, Mommy," scrawled in crooked letters. I pressed the cool ceramic against my chest, tears stinging my eyes. How could the same little girl who made this have grown into the woman who tried to erase me? I wandered through the rest of the house in a daze, cataloging each change. The bathrooms gutted and rebuilt with expensive tile. The basement finished into a game room. The backyard stripped of my vegetable garden and replaced with stone pavers. Every corner felt like an invasion. Every change screamed that I no longer belonged here. And yet legally, this was still mine. That knowledge steadied me, even as grief gnawed at my insides. By late afternoon, I sat on the back porch, staring at the yard. My garden was gone, but the oak tree still stood tall, branches stretching toward the sky. Kate had once hung a tire swing there. She'd spent whole summers climbing those limbs, laughing as she reached higher than I dared watch. The tree had outlasted everything. So would I. I was still sitting there when I heard footsteps crunching on the driveway. My chest tightened as a familiar voice called out. "Mrs. Patterson?" I turned. A young woman stood at the gate, holding the hand of a small boy. Her brown hair caught the sunlight, her face warm with curiosity. "I'm Emily Henderson," she said hesitantly. "We've been in touch with Derek about buying this house." The boy peered at me shyly, clutching his mother's hand. For a moment, I couldn't speak. This was the family who thought they were moving in. This was who Kate had tried to hand my home to. Emily shifted nervously. We heard there might be some confusion. Derek told us everything was fine, but honestly, he sounded nervous. And when he wouldn't let us back in to see the house again, She stopped, embarrassed. I wanted to check for myself. I stood slowly, heart pounding. This was it, the moment where I had to choose whether to hide behind silence or tell the truth. I looked at Emily, at the worry etched on her young face, at the child tugging at her sleeve, and felt a pang of pity. They were innocent. They didn't deserve to be caught in Kate and Derek's schemes. "The house isn't theirs to sell," I said finally. My voice trembled, but the words came out clear. "It never was. It's mine, always has been." Her eyes widened. But the contracts, they signed them without my consent, which means they're worthless." Emily's face fell. She glanced down at her son, then back at me. "We've already started packing. We told our kids they'd have a yard, a tree to climb. We thought this would be our forever home." My chest tightened with guilt. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "This isn't your fault, none of it. But you deserve to know the truth before you lose more than boxes." Emily nodded slowly, her face pale. "Thank you for being honest with me. I think we need to talk to our lawyer." She turned to leave, her son clutching her hand, but halfway down the driveway, she paused. "Mrs. Patterson," she called back softly, "be careful. Derek strikes me as the kind of man who doesn't like losing." Her words lingered long after she disappeared from sight. That evening, I walked through the house again, clutching the ceramic handprint to my chest. The renovations, the lies, the betrayal. They could strip away paint, furniture, gardens, but they couldn't take this memory. They couldn't take my history. This was still my house. But I couldn't shake Emily's warning. I stood in the dim light of my apartment hallway, the unmarked envelope trembling in my hands. The words on the paper burned into me. "You can't win. Sign the papers, or we'll make sure you never live in that house again." I read it twice, 3 times, hoping the letters might rearrange into something less sinister. They didn't. For years, I had feared abandonment. Now I feared something darker, that my own child and her husband had crossed a line from betrayal into outright menace. I sank into the armchair, the paper fluttering in my lap. My mind spun with possibilities. Kate had sent angry texts, cruel words, but this didn't sound like her voice. This was colder, sharper. Derek's handprints were all over it. And yet, would my daughter really let him threaten me like this? The next morning, I met Brennan at his office. He studied the letter, lips pressed into a grim line. "This isn't just family drama anymore," he said. "This is intimidation. We need to take precautions." Precautions? My voice sounded smaller than I intended. "Change your locks again. Document everything. If there are more letters, calls, threats, save them. Don't engage directly. Let me handle communication." I nodded, but the truth was, fear had already begun seeping into my bones. Every knock on the door, every shadow in the hallway, felt like it carried Derek's silhouette. 2 days later, the phone rang while I was making tea. The caller ID flashed. Dr. Martinez. My physician. Mrs. Patterson. His voice was careful, almost apologetic. "I received a call from your daughter yesterday. She's concerned about your mental health. She suggested you might be confused, that you're imagining things about the house." The mug slipped in my hand, hot tea splashing across the counter. "She said that?" I whispered. "She insisted. She asked me to recommend a cognitive evaluation." I closed my eyes, the pieces clicking together. Derek's plan. If they couldn't take the house legally, they'd take it by force of narrative by painting me as incompetent. "She's lying," I said, my voice steady even as my hands shook. "I'm not confused. I have the deed. I have the trust. I know exactly what I'm doing." "I believe you," Dr. Martinez said gently. "But if they escalate, you need to be prepared. Do you have support? People who can vouch for your clarity?" His question hung in the air long after we ended the call. Support. Did I? That night, I found myself at Sarah Jenkins's door. My neighbor opened with a warm smile, ushering me into the smell of grilled chicken and lemon pie. Over dinner, I told her everything: the house, the fraudulent sale, the letter, the doctor's call. Sarah reached across the table, her hand firm on mine. "You're not crazy, Margaret. I've lived next door to you for years. You are sharper than half the women in our bridge club. If they try to say otherwise, they'll have to get through me." Her husband Bill chimed in. "And me, and anyone else who knows you. You've got more backbone than most people half your age." Their words steadied me, like anchors in a storm. Maybe I wasn't alone after all. The following week, I returned to the Maple Street house with Brennan to survey the renovations and document everything. The Hendersons had officially pulled out of the sale, citing legal complications, but Brennan warned me, Kate and Derek won't stop, not until they're cornered. Inside the house, I snapped photos of every change, every receipt they'd left behind. Brennan shook his head at the granite countertops, the gutted den. "They'll argue sweat equity," he muttered. "But it won't hold. They invested in property they didn't own." As we packed up, Brennan handed me a folder. I filed notice to void the contracts. "Derek will know by tomorrow. Expect fallout." Fallout came faster than I expected. That night, the phone rang. Kate's voice exploded before I could speak. "How could you? Do you know what you've done? The Hendersons are furious. Derek's firm is in trouble, and now everything is falling apart. Do you enjoy ruining lives, Mom?" I swallowed, forcing my voice calm. "I'm not ruining lives, Kate. I'm protecting mine." She let out a bitter laugh. "Protecting? You're destroying your family. You're destroying me." "Kate," I whispered, "I'm your mother. Why are you doing this?" Her voice cracked then, just slightly. "Because I don't have a choice." The line went dead. Those words haunted me for days. I don't have a choice. What did she mean? Was Derek holding something over her? Or had greed truly swallowed her whole? I found myself pacing the apartment at night, clutching the ceramic handprint from her childhood. Somewhere inside her was the little girl who once loved me fiercely. But was she gone forever? The answer came unexpectedly. One evening, as I returned from the grocery store, I saw Kate waiting by my apartment door. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red-rimmed, she looked smaller, fragile, like the child I remembered. "Mom," she whispered when I approached, "we need to talk." Inside, she sat on my couch, twisting her hands together. "It's Derek," she said finally. "He pushed for all of this, the renovations, the sale, the threats. He says the firm is drowning in debt, and this house was our way out. He promised if I just went along, everything would be fine." Tears slid down her cheeks. "But now it's not fine, it's worse, and I don't know how to fix it." I stared at her, my heart warring with itself. Part of me wanted to believe her, to see this as an olive branch. Another part whispered that it could be another manipulation. "Kate," I said slowly, "if you want to fix this, you need to stand up to him. Tell the truth. Admit what you did." She shook her head violently. "I can't. If I betray him, he'll ruin me. He knows things about the firm, about money we moved. I can't, Mom. I'm trapped." Her voice broke into a sob. "Please, help me." The knock still echoed in my ears, even after the door shut on Derek's face. The envelope he'd shoved into my hand sat heavy on the coffee table like a ticking bomb. Kate perched on the edge of the couch, her face pale, her mascara smudged from tears. "Mom," she whispered, "you don't understand. He'll do anything." "I do understand," I said quietly, sliding the papers out of the envelope. "And that's exactly why I'm not signing." The legal jargon blurred before my eyes. Petition for injunction, claim of unjust enrichment, implied transfer of property rights. It was Derek's handwriting in legalese, dressed up to look intimidating. But one sentence leapt out at me like a blade. Respondent exhibits signs of diminished capacity and confusion regarding ownership rights. He wasn't just trying to steal my house. He was trying to erase me. The next morning, Brennan scanned the documents with calm efficiency. His office smelled of leather and coffee, the shelves lined with law books worn at the spines. "He's overreaching," Brennan said, tapping a page with his pen. "Unjust enrichment doesn't apply when renovations were unauthorized. Implied contracts mean nothing without evidence. This is a bluff." "He's painting me as senile," I said flatly. Brennan's eyes softened. "Because intimidation is the only weapon he has left. But Margaret judges aren't fools. You are sharp, coherent, and prepared. Let me remind you, you hold the deed. You hold the trust. You hold the law." His words steadied me, though my heart still raced. Kate sat quietly beside me, her hands twisted in her lap. "He won't stop," she whispered. "You don't know Derek like I do." I looked at her, the weight of years pressing down. "Then maybe it's time the court knows Derek like you do." The courthouse was a cold box of bureaucracy, buzzing with murmured conversations and squeaking shoes. The fluorescent lights washed every face into pallor. Derek stood across the aisle, tall and composed in a tailored suit, his hair perfectly slicked back. His lawyer, a younger man with sharp features, shuffled papers confidently. Derek radiated smug certainty, as though the verdict had already been written in his favor. I sat with Brennan, my papers neatly stacked, Kate between us. Her leg bounced nervously under the table. "Just breathe," Brennan murmured. "Tell the truth. The truth is our greatest weapon." When Derek's lawyer rose, his tone was syrupy, confident. "Your Honor," he began, "we are dealing with a classic case of misunderstanding. My clients, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, have invested significant financial resources, nearly $30,000 into the property at 415 Maple Street. Renovations, improvements, maintenance, all with the implied consent of the respondent. They acted in good faith, entered into contracts with third parties, and are now facing catastrophic financial damages due to Mrs. Patterson's erratic reversal." He paused, glancing at me as though I were a frail relic. "It is our position that Mrs. Patterson may be suffering from diminished capacity, leading to confusion about the status of ownership and prior agreements." A sharp murmur rippled through the courtroom. I clenched my fists under the table. Brennan rose slowly, calmly. His presence filled the room without theatrics. "Your Honor, opposing counsel has delivered a fine speech, tragic, even. But speeches don't change facts. The deed remains in my client's name. The trust remains unbroken. At no point did Mrs. Patterson consent to any transfer, written or otherwise. Improvements made without her authorization are simply that, unauthorized. He slid the original deed across the table, his voice steady as stone. Ownership is not transferred by assumption. Ownership is not transferred by family dinner conversations. Ownership requires consent, and consent requires signatures. None exist here. Derek shifted in his seat, a flicker of unease breaking through his polished facade. Brennan wasn't finished. He held up the trust, pages rustling like a storm. And if there were any doubt, this trust makes it crystal clear. Inheritance was conditional upon respect, inclusion, and care. Conditions which, as we will show, have been systematically violated. The defendants not only lack ownership, they have forfeited all future claim to this property. The courtroom grew still. Derek's lawyer opened his mouth, but Brennan had stolen the oxygen from the room. Then Brennan turned gently to Kate. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "would you care to explain to the court how these renovations and sales were handled?" Kate's face drained of color. Her hands shook as she stood. "My husband pressured me," she said, voice cracking. "I thought we were doing the right thing, paying debts, securing our future. But my mother never gave permission. She never signed anything. She didn't even know about the contracts until it was too late." Her eyes darted to Derek. He glared at her, his face a mask of fury. "But it was wrong," Kate whispered. "All of it. I can't pretend anymore." Silence fell like a gavel. The judge leaned back, expression unreadable. "We'll need to review all documentation," he said finally. "No ruling today, but I've heard enough to consider the petition highly questionable." Derek's jaw locked, his composure cracking. He leaned into his lawyer's ear, whispering furiously. "Brennan touched my arm. This is good. We're winning ground." But I couldn't shake the sight of Derek's face. Fury, yes, but beneath it, something else. Calculation. He wasn't beaten. Not yet. Outside the courthouse, Kate broke down in tears. "I'm sorry, Mom. I've made such a mess of everything." I looked at her, torn between anger and love. "You betrayed me, Kate, but you also saved me today. Which one will define you?" "That's up to you." She nodded, sobbing, but I could see doubt flickering in her eyes. Derek still had a hold on her. That evening, alone in my apartment, my phone buzzed. "Mrs. Patterson?" a deep voice said. "This is Officer Daniels with Hartford PD. We received a report that you threatened Mr. Thompson with physical harm during a recent dispute. We need to ask a few questions." My knees went weak. "That's not true," I whispered. The officer sighed. "That's often the case with family conflicts. But we have to follow up. Do you have documentation of any threats against you?" "Yes," I said quickly. "I have everything. Notes, calls, legal filings. I'll show you." When they left, unconvinced but not hostile, I sat in the silence, shaking. Derek's strategy was clear. If he couldn't take my house legally, he'd try to brand me unfit, unstable, dangerous. Later that night, I stood by my window, the city lights reflecting in the glass. For years, I'd been terrified of being forgotten. Now, my fear had sharpened into something else, being erased while still alive. But as I held the trust papers in my hands, their weight steadied me. I wasn't powerless, I wasn't invisible, not anymore. The memory of Derek's smirk lingered with me long after the car disappeared down the street, his lips forming those silent words through the windshield. "It's not over." That night I barely slept. I tossed in bed, mind caught in a loop of courtroom echoes and Kate's trembling confession. I kept seeing that folder Derek's companion flipped through, thick with papers that seemed to contain secrets sharp enough to cut me down. Every time I closed my eyes, the thought came back, what else could he possibly have? At dawn, I rose with heavy eyes but a hardened heart. Enough of being cornered, enough of reacting. It was time to act. At Brennan's office, he greeted me with a coffee and a grim face. "Margaret," he said, his voice weighed down with fatigue. "Derek filed another motion overnight. He's claiming power of attorney retroactively." The words hung in the air like smoke. My heart stuttered. "Power of attorney? I never signed anything." Brennan nodded. "I know, but he's presenting a document as evidence. It's fake but dangerous. He's banking on confusion and intimidation." He slid the paper across the desk. My stomach twisted when I saw it. My name scrawled at the bottom, familiar yet foreign. My signature but warped, misshapen, forged. I whispered, He's stolen my hand. Brennan's jaw tightened. And that means felony, fraud. But until the court rules, we'll have to fight every inch. The hearing was set for the next morning. The courtroom felt colder than usual, as though the very air disapproved of what was about to unfold. Derek walked in wearing a navy suit that looked pressed to perfection, his hair slicked back, his lawyer carrying the thick folder like a weapon. Kate trailed behind them, pale and hollow-eyed, refusing to meet my gaze. When Derek's lawyer presented the forged power of attorney, he did so with the confidence of a man revealing a royal flush. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "this document clearly shows Mrs. Patterson entrusted her daughter to act on her behalf in all property matters. My clients acted in good faith, renovating and selling the property according to her wishes." He slid the paper to the judge with a flourish. I stared at it in horror. There it was, my name, twisted against me. Brennan rose calmly, his voice carrying no theatrics, only steel. "Your Honor, that document is fraudulent. The notary stamp belongs to a man who died in 2018. This alleged power of attorney would have been witnessed by someone already in the grave." The courtroom rippled with gasps. The judge leaned forward, frowning at the paper, suspicion hardening his face. Derek's composure cracked. His lawyer stammered about clerical errors, but the damage was already done. The judge's voice rang out. "This document is stricken from the record. Further investigation into its origins will be pursued. Fraud will not be tolerated." I felt my lungs fill for the first time in hours. Derek sat rigid, fury and fear colliding in his eyes. But Brennan wasn't finished. He turned to Kate and spoke gently. "Mrs. Thompson, would you like to share your perspective with the court?" Kate stood slowly, trembling like a leaf. Her voice broke as she spoke. "My husband pushed for this. All of it. The renovations, the contracts, even the threatening note. I went along because I thought it would save us, help with debts, but it was wrong. My mother never gave permission. She never transferred the house. We lied to her. We lied to everyone." The room fell into stunned silence. Derek's face flushed crimson as he hissed at her under his breath, his fists tightening on the table. Kate kept her eyes on me, her tears shimmering. "I betrayed her, and I'm sorry." The judge adjourned without a ruling, but the direction was clear. Derek's credibility was collapsing. Outside, reporters clustered at the steps, their microphones catching snippets of outrage and confession. Derek stormed away, shoving Kate aside, his voice harsh and venomous. Kate lingered near me, her voice trembling. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mom, but I told the truth today. I hope that means something." I studied her face, torn between the memory of a little girl clutching my hand and the woman who had nearly destroyed me. "It's a start," I said softly. She nodded, sobbing quietly, while Derek's glare burned holes from across the street. For the first time, I saw fear in him, not of me, but of losing the control he'd built his life around. In the weeks that followed, his world crumbled. The Hendersons sued for misrepresentation. His law firm announced bankruptcy. Rumors of malpractice spread like wildfire. He appeared in newspapers, no longer as a rising attorney but as a cautionary tale. Kate moved into a small apartment with the children, away from Derek. She called sometimes, cautiously, asking about recipes, about old photo albums, about nothing at all. I listened, not ready to forgive but unwilling to sever the line completely. Meanwhile, I reclaimed my house. The renovations they'd imposed were scars, but they could be healed. I painted over the sterile gray walls with warm yellow, planted tulips and tomatoes in the garden, restored the bookshelves with my journals and Kate's old-school projects. Piece by piece, memory returned. Piece by piece, the house breathed again. Each nail hammered, each brushstroke of paint felt like defiance, a declaration. You tried to erase me, but I remain. 6 months later, Brennan and I met again. This time, the papers on the table were my choice. "When I die," I said firmly, "the house doesn't go to Kate, it goes to the Children's Hospital Foundation." Brennan raised his brows, then nodded. "They'll use it for pediatric cancer research. It's a noble legacy." I signed without hesitation. For years, my life had been defined by giving everything to Kate, even when she gave nothing back. Now, my house would serve children who needed hope more than she needed wealth. It wasn't revenge, it was release. Autumn came, painting Maple Street in gold and crimson. Life slowed into gentler rhythms. I joined a reading group at the library. Sarah and Bill invited me for Sunday dinners. On quiet evenings, I sat on the porch with tea, listening to the leaves rustle like whispers of old stories. For the first time in years, peace settled into my bones. And yet, grief lingered. Some nights I held the small ceramic handprint Kate made in second grade, tracing the words scratched into its surface. "I love you, Mommy." I wondered if she ever looked at hers, if she ever remembered. Some wounds scar, some never close. One October evening, as the sun dipped low and the marigolds glowed orange, a car pulled up in front of the house. Kate stepped out, her children racing past her toward the oak tree. Their laughter filled the yard, a sound so achingly familiar it caught in my throat. Kate walked slowly up the path, her hands twisting nervously. "Mom," she said quietly, "can we talk? Without Derek. Just us." Before I could answer, her youngest shouted from the tree, his voice bright and innocent. "Grandma, is this going to be our house someday?" The words pierced the air like a blade. Kate froze, her eyes snapping to mine. My heart thudded in my chest as I clutched the ceramic handprint in my pocket, its edges pressing into my palm. The battle in court was over. Derek had been defeated. The house was mine. But as Kate's children dangled from the branches of the oak tree, as her gaze locked on mine in silent desperation, I realized something chilling. The legal war might have ended, but the war of legacy of what this house would mean, of whether betrayal could ever give way to forgiveness, was only just beginning. And the question that lingered in the cool autumn air, heavier than any verdict, was this: could I ever trust my daughter again? Or had the story only started to write itself all over again?